Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the 5th round of the Spill Embargo Open. Now, the famous YouTuber and aspiring Grandmaster candidate, Levy Rozman, is playing once again. He won his first game. He's had 3 draws in a row, so he's got to try to get it going. He needs to win some games, and in the 5th round, he has white pieces against another 2200 rated player, his 4th 2200 level player in a row. So, let's jump right into the action. So Levy is playing against Stefano Maldonado Gonzalez from Italy, and the game starts out with the move c4. We get e6, knight f3, d5, and now we have this move e3. After knight to f6, Levy plays knight c3 here. We get c6, and now he plays the move b3. Now, Levy has been playing a lot of these sort of quiet systems. Usually, he plays a slightly different order. Normally, he starts out with something like knight f3, d5, and e3, and then c4. I don't have a problem with the systems, but if someone is going to play e6 and d5, it's very hard to sort of come up with a move order trick and get them outside of their general system, which involves the queen's gambit declined. So I would have preferred to see Levy play something like d4, which is a little bit more aggressive. It leads to more tactical positions, whereas b3 is much quieter. And I feel like against a lower rated opponent where they can generally just follow their setup, it's not as effective. So we get the move bishop d6. Levy plays bishop b2. We get the move castles, and now we have the move d4 from Levy. Here his opponent plays knight bd7, and now Levy goes bishop d3. We get the move rook to e8. Black is intending to play for this move e5, or white will have to play for this move e4. Somebody is going to break the center. It's really just a question of who. So here Levy plays the move queen c2, completely reasonable. The other option was to try and castle the king to the king side, but after e5 takes and knight takes e5 here, if white tries to play c takes d5, after knight takes f3, if you take with the queen, there's now bishop g4, and very quickly it's an uh-oh spaghetti-o moment. The knight guards the bishop, and the queen is trapped as there are no other squares available. So you can't take and get this position with the isolated pawn, which means you have to trade the knights first, but after knight takes e5, bishop takes e5. If you take on d5 here, black can now take with the knight. You open up the long diagonal, you have a wooden shield here, and very quickly in this position, black is doing very well. Black should, in fact, just be better. So, Levy plays queen c2 instead, trying to line up the bishop and the queen on the long diagonal. We get this move e5. He, of course, takes. You do not play a move like castles here, because after e4, now suddenly the pawns guard each other, and the bishop and the knight get forked. So Levy takes on e5, we get knight takes pawn, knight takes knight, bishop takes, and now we have the move castles. Now you'll notice the computer is not a big fan of this opening from Levy. Overall, I don't have a big issue with it. He's been able to castle his king out of the center of the board. He's been able to finish his development. And at this point, with kings being on opposite sides, his opponent having castled king side and Levy castling queen side, he's going to get a very dynamic position, which should become sharp, and that should favor Levy due to his playing style. So we get the move bishop to e6. Levy plays f4 here, trying to kick the bishop off of this diagonal. What Levy would love is to get a position like this, for example, where he has the 2 Bs, which are open on these diagonals, and white should be better. So after f4, we get the move bishop to d6 being played. Now we have g3. This is not a move that I like, by the way. I think Levy kind of losing a little bit of the thread here. Probably h3 would have made more sense to go for g4, but it's understandable that Levy was worried probably about queen b6, hitting the pawns on e3 and f4 here, or even something like d takes c4, and after takes, and queen to e7, the queen side looks a little bit open here with these weak pawns on a2 and c4. There's b5 maybe. Try to open up the b and c files. Try to bring the queen down. Just to show you guys a sample line, g4, b5. If you take, now suddenly the c file is completely open here for black, and white is in a lot of trouble. So, completely understandable why Levy chose not to play this, but g3 feels a little bit slow, because what he's really hoping to do is get something like a6 and then e4, because now the pawn on f4 is guarded, it cannot be captured, and after takes, let's just say black trades the knights, for example, now you have the 2 bishops on these long diagonals, the rook is on the open d file, there's also queen to c3 here, and white is doing very well. So after g3, we got the move bishop to g4 being played. Now we have rook to e1, and here we have the move queen to a5. Now, Levy's opponent has played a great game so far. There's pressure on the e-pawn. He's maybe bringing the rook to d-file. There's bishop b4, bishop a3. And Levy's rooks on e1 and h1 aren't super active. And when you combine that with the fact that Levy is not even attacking on the king side here, it doesn't look very good. So Levy goes king b1. We get bishop to b4. pinning the knight on c3, and now Levy plays h3. We get bishop to f3, rook to f1, and now we have this move bishop to e4, which is a mistake, but again, not the craziest mistake here. The computer wants bishop to g2, attacking the rook and the pawn, and after queen takes bishop, bishop takes knight, takes, and queen c2, for example, black is simply much better here after queen to a5 due to this pressure on the rook on e1 from the queen on a5 and the pressure on the pawn on e3. Sample line, if white goes e4 here, you can go rook to e6 here, and with the idea of rook a to e8 here combined with the pressure on the rook on e1, white is actually losing, shockingly enough. So bishop g2 would have been very strong. At this level, it's not that surprising that it wasn't played. Instead, we get to move bishop to e4. Levy plays rook to e2, breaking the pin of the bishop and the queen towards the rook on e1. We get the trade of the bishops, and now we have the move knight to e4. Now, Levy's opponent has played great so far, but the one thing you have to keep in mind is that all these moves have felt very natural. They're very natural moves. They're very, very easy to play. So even though his opponent's only rated 2200, these are not difficult moves that his opponent has had to find. So we get takes, queen to d4 here. Now we have f6 to break up the checkmate idea with the double A battery. And here Levy goes queen to d7. In this position, Levy's opponent plays move queen to h5. Computer likes rook e7 more. It's really a matter of choice here because rook e7 does allow queen g4 with some pressure towards the king side. Obviously, black is still better according to the computer, but queen h5 is also very natural here as you hit the rook and the pawn. Here, Levy plays move queen g4, and this is an excellent decision because now he is offering the queen trade, and if Levy can trade the queens off the board, a lot of the pressure and a lot of the issues in the position vanish, because the main issue that white has here is that black can potentially control this open d file, and with queens on the board, let's just say you get, I don't know, h4. Let's just say you get something like this. I'm just going to set it up. Let me just set the position up. Say you got some position like this, for example. Black can bring the rook to d3. You can line up a double stack on the d file. Even down the road, you can probably play something like queen to b6 to pressure the pawn on e3 or bishop c5 as well. So the control over the only open file, along with the pressure that you can create on this pawn on e3 as well, with either queen b6 or bishop c5, really makes it hard for white to play. So when Levy gets to this position with queen g4, his opponent here makes an epic mistake, which is to trade the queens. Now, this is not a huge mistake overall. It's still better for black. But after queen to f7, with queen still on the board here and black still trying to contest the only open file here with rook a d8, black should be doing quite well. Because when the queens get traded off the board, even though black still temporarily controls the open d file here, there is not enough pressure on the e3 pawn or anything else really. So we get a3, bishop f8, Levy goes king c2, and now we get the move c5 here. You'll also notice that the black bishop now very passive. It's not an active piece. On b4, there was some potential to maybe help a score rook to d2, maybe get something to e1. Now, after we get this position with c5, bishop is very passive. There's a pawn in the way. Bishop does nothing really. It's simply at home. Sure, white's bishop is also passive, but now all the danger is gone, and with Levy being a stronger player, he should get chances to win the game. So, all right. Here we get the move rook to h1 from Levy. We get bishop e7. His opponent here kind of meandering a little bit. Also, as I said before, the ideas than the plans, if they're very basic and simple, whoever has the easier plans, position should be simpler to play. And here, Levy is the one who has all the choices. He can try to put the rooks on the h file. He can try to go bishop c3 and b4. He can also go rook d2 to trade the rooks if he wants to. So Levy has three very straightforward and simple ABC plans. His opponent doesn't have any real ideas at all, which means his opponent has to maneuver and try to anticipate what Levy's going to do. But for Levy, it should be smooth sailing. Now, that being said, Levy is not actually better here. It's simply easier to play. So we get bishop c3, b6 is played. By the way, one thing that I did want to point out, now rook d3 is far less effective because after rook he1, let's just say king f7 and rook d2, if black ever trades the rooks here, you can still try to go for rook d3, but it actually doesn't do a whole lot because now there's no way to put pressure on the pawn on e3 since you don't have this bishop c5 move. So back to the game, we get this move b6. Levy plays b4 here. We get h6 being played. Levy's opponent probably should have traded the pawns here, trying to open up the scope for the bishop and then play rook d3, because after he goes h6 and we get b5, there are two big problems here. On top of all the moves and plans being easier for white, white now can try to open up the a file with a4, a5. Also, all of black's pawns, as you'll notice, with the exception of this pawn on e4, they are all on the same color as the darks for bishop, which does give Levy very good chances in the long run. So, we get the move king f7. Levy plays a4, we get rook a8, and now he goes a5, trying to expand immediately and put pressure on the a file. One sample line of what Levy would love to do, the dream at least, is to get some position like this, where you stack the rooks, then you take on b6, and you try to infiltrate on the 7th rank. Instead, Levy goes a5, his opponent plays the move a6 here, which is a good move. We get rook to a1, we have pawn takes pawn, and now Levy plays the move king to b3. Obviously, you'll notice the computer is screaming that this is a mistake the eval bar has shot down, but I actually rather like this move from a general standpoint. Levy probably should have played the move b6, but I assume he thought that after rook to b8, bishop takes a5, and bishop to d8, this was likely going to be a draw after rook b1, rook d7, rook d2, king e6, and something like rook d5 and rook c8 here. Now, I don't actually see why white should be winning immediately, but white is apparently better. Levy goes king b3 here, trying to bring the king to either the a4 or the c4 squares. We get rook to b8. Now we have king to a4, guarding the pawn on b5. And at this point, even though Levy is temporarily down a pawn, he is going to end up with a passed pawn here on the b file, which is marching towards b8. The a pawn, the passed pawn, is blockaded. And white can now try to use the open d file as well. We get rook b7. Levy goes rook b1. We get bishop to d8. Rook b1 is a move designed to guard the pawn on b5. And now we get the move rook d2, trying to infiltrate on the d file. Levy's opponent goes bishop b6. Levy plays rook to d6. And now we get to move king e7. And we have rook b to d1. Here, Levy is controlling the open file. He has this protected passed pawn. The pawns on a5 and c5 are weak. Even this pawn on e4 can become very weak. For example, if you get a check and then you win the pawn, this also is very good. So we get rook d1, rook d8 is played. This is a big mistake, obviously, because now after the trade and bishop takes a5, Levy is simply winning the game here. He has this passed b pawn going up the board. Black's c pawn is extremely slow, and to make matters even worse, the rook cuts off this king from ever running to the c file. So we get takes, rook a7, king b6, rook to a3 is played, and now Levy correctly plays the move king c7, jettisoning the e3 pawn because he knows his b pawn is simply way too fast. Here we get c4, b6, rook to d3 is played, and now we get the move b7. Not the only way to win, of course, but very, very technically sound. If Black were to play c3 here, by the way, one last point, I guess b7 wins, but I would probably just go rook to c1, stopping the pawn on c3, and now Black simply has no way to check the king. If you go here, b7, b8, you're going to get the queen and win the game. At b7, c2, I guess there's a rook d7 line that wins, but just to show why you have to be careful, if you go rook c1, now Black can start checking on the c, b, and a files. There always are these 3 checks available, and the game would end in a draw. So I would probably go rook to c1. Now there's no way to get the rook to c file to check, and the king is shielded. You push the pawn and win the game. So after b6, we get rook d3. Here, Levy plays move b7. Rook to c1 would also be good enough, but Levy understands that even giving away the rook, sacking the rook on d1, and getting a queen is good enough because there's so many pawns on the board that there will never be any fortresses. We get rook to d7, king c6, and now we have to move rook d3, and here Levy plays queen b4, checking the king. Now we get king to e8, queen takes c4, rook takes e3, queen to g8 check, king e7, queen takes g7, king e8, and now Levy plays the move queen to d7. We get king f8, queen to c8, and here his opponent resigns the game. Now, this game was maybe not super clean. Definitely Levy's opening wasn't the greatest. His opponent was actually very well prepared or understood the general piece placement of where everything belonged and got a pretty solid position. Nonetheless, Levy in this game did something that he has not done in a lot of the other games, which is he was able to keep the game going. What I mean by that is that even after the middle game, they head towards the end game, he kept the game going. It was not a situation where there were like very limited pieces on the board. The pawns were on both sides. There were always chances for his opponent to have to make decisions and make mistakes. And that is actually where Levy has his biggest advantage against these players, is that if he can keep the game going for 30, 40, 50 moves without it leading straight into a position which is a simple end game, he should eventually win these games because he is better than these players, at least by rating. So he did a very good job at just keeping this game going, improving the position. Sure, his opponent was fine for most of the game, but once it got deep in the end game, the blunders did start occurring, and Levy's technique was very, very good today. So he gets a big win in the 5th round with the white pieces. Now, today there are 2 games being played, so Levy wins his first game. He is now playing the second game of the day against a very severely underrated 2198 Indian kid, his second underrated Indian junior player of the tournament. So we'll see how he does in that game. I'll try to recap it later on, but at any rate, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap of Levy's 5th round game in the Spill and Open. Open being held in Italy. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back soon with some great new recaps. I'll see you guys in a bit. Have a good one. Bye.